Okay. All right. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a public meeting for the MedRecycler. I think the technical name is MedRecyclerRI, public informational meeting. The proposed facility is located at 1600 Division Road in West Warwick. As I mentioned, my name is Mark Dennen. I'm a supervising environmental scientist with the Department of Environmental Management. My email address and contact and phone number are there. With me is project manager Yen Lee. She is a principal engineer with my office. And also with me from the MedRecycler team are Nicholas Campanella, Richard Bingham, Mark Schweig, and Jeff Hanson. I'm going to give you an overview of what the process is for public comment and permit review. Then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Campanella. Mr. Campanella is going to talk about the project. And then afterwards, you can ask any questions, clarifications we have. He has a number of people from his team, and we're here as well. Okay. So let's see. All right. So the purpose of today's and I'll try not to read verbatim, but I put it on here so that if I forget to mention anything, it's there. The purpose of today's meeting, informational workshop, is to, well, first of all, it is required by our regulations. And as I mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. This is being permitted under the Rhode Island DEM medical waste regulations. So the public notice regarding this proposed permit was placed in the Kent County Daily Times, the Warwick Beacon, the East Greenwich Pendulum, and was also placed in the Providence Journal. And all those ads happened last week. Today's Monday, so that's last week. So the purpose of this, we're not going to make any decisions here today. The purpose of this informational workshop is to give public and other interested parties an opportunity to learn about the application, what is proposed, and we've also made available draft permit conditions. So this is an opportunity to take questions and have a question and answer session where people can get their information to allow them, should they want to make a formal public comment for or against the project, to give you the information that you need to help your comments be as focused and as knowledgeable as possible. So this is not the formal public hearing. This is an informational workshop. We'll have a formal public hearing on March 15th, and I put the Zoom ID number in there. It's also in the public notice. At the hearing, we'll record all comments that are received from interested parties, and we'll continue to accept comments for 30 days after the hearing. So you have until April 15th, which is tax day, I believe, April 15th to submit written comments. You can submit them by email or in writing or at the formal hearing or both. Written comments, and I put in our address. They should be sent to Yen Lee's attention in our office if you choose to do them in writing. As I say, you can send them by email too. After we've received all the public comments, we'll compile the written comments. So we won't, this is your question and answer session. At the formal public hearing, it'll be more a case where I just ask people to make a comment for the record, and then I'll say, thank you for your comment, and I'll ask the next person to comment. So at that workshop, at that event, we won't be taking questions. So this really is your opportunity to have more back and forth of information. The purpose for that is that the comments that are received at the public hearing will come up with written responses. Those responses will be reviewed by management and by our legal team, as well as the technical team. So that's why we take the opportunity to really look at each of those and make sure that they get a response in writing. We have made available on our website the application itself, the public notice, and the notice of intent to approve, as well as our draft permit conditions. So within 90 days of the close of the public comment period, which is April 15th, I don't know what 90 days is exactly from there, the director will make a decision, and the decision will either be to issue or deny the permit. So I want to talk a little bit about the scope of this review and how we're looking at it. The application, our office is responsible for medical, solid, and hazardous waste regulations. It has to meet the requirements of all three. The regulatory review is focused on human health as well as the environment. Air permitting and compliance monitoring with that permit is also done by our Office of Air Resources. Our review and our permit does not override any other state or local controls. So issues such as traffic, noise, zoning, that we may not have jurisdiction over, those things may still be regulated by other local and state agencies. In fact, they are regulated by other local and state agencies. Things like fire contingency, we have certain rules, but there may also be other rules by local fire department, other requirements. Now, just because it's not part of our application, that doesn't mean you can't ask a question today about traffic or zoning or any other issue relative to this facility. Won't say you can't ask questions, certainly can. But just so I set expectations, our review is focused on human health and the environment and whether or not this application meets the requirements of our regulations. So as I say, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions, get information, help you formulate your official comments. We're not going to make any decisions today. The formal hearing in March, as I mentioned, there won't be any questions and answers. So does anyone have any questions about the department's process before I hand it off to the MedRecycler team? And I may stop sharing for just a moment so that I can see if someone has their hands up. Give me just 1 second here. Okay. I don't see that anybody's indicate they have a question about the process. Oh, there's a bunch of people I didn't admit. I wasn't keeping. Okay. I'm going to give those people a moment to connect before I hand it off. For anyone that's just joining us, I apologize if I've tried to keep up with letting people in the room, and I think I went a couple of minutes there where I didn't check the waiting room. But I just talked about, and I won't go through the whole thing again, but I just talked about how the purpose of today's meeting is to give people information to allow them to focus their comments. We're having a public comment on March 15th. You can also send us comments in writing and by email. So today, we're trying to give you the information that you need to send us meaningful and informed comments. So that being said, I'm going to continue to let people in the room as they come. But Mr. Campanella, do you want to take over and give us an introduction to your proposed facility?
Sure, that's not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to share. If you can't, please let me know.
Yep, got it.
And if I can just, I'm sorry, I know I meant to hand it off to you. For anybody who's just joining us, I'm not going to ask 40 people to introduce themselves because I know your time is valuable. But if you want to make people aware that you were here, or you want us to know that, you want to leave contact information, please feel free to do so in the chat. You can chat me privately, or you can send a chat to everyone. Did somebody have a question about the process before we start? Deborah?
Oh, hi. Yeah. I was just curious if this was the first of its kind in the country.
Okay. Oh, so you know what? I'm going to ask you to, if questions about the facility itself, why don't I let Mr. Campanella talk about it? And then you want to take questions after, Nick?
Yeah, I'll do my PowerPoint presentation, And then, between myself and my engineers, we can go over and answer whatever questions come up.
Okay, would that be okay? And I know several people are giving me their email addresses. Encourage you to keep doing that. If you want, then I'll make sure and give you any information comes up. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Nick Campanella. Nick, you can also have other members of your team share as well. So I'm going to mute myself because I could talk all day and people are probably afraid that I will. So Nick, if you wanted to go ahead and take over.
Sure, thank you. My name is Nick Campanella. I am the principal of MedRecycler. We decided to build out this facility in West Warwick, and we've been working with DEM probably now for close to about 2 years with local professionals as well. Basically, our facility we're building, we're looking to build, we're going to be creating between 20 to 30 new permanent jobs, as well as creating a lot of union and tradesmen jobs within the state. Looking at probably close to about 100 new jobs that we're going to be assisting with. We're going to be creating tax revenue both for the town and for the state. We're creating renewable energy, enough to power about 1,000 homes. And what we're also doing is we're going to help extend the life of the landfill, which right now is at capacity by 2030. Our facility, as you know, is on 1600 Division Road in West Warwick. Our occupancy is about 48,000 square feet of a little bit over 540,000 square foot building or industrial park that's there adjacent to I-95. Our whole facility and our project is 100% privately funded from our own investment sources. As I mentioned before, we're going to be generating about 1.2 to 1.3 megawatts of clean energy during the course of the year. Again, about 1,000 homes. The waste that we create is processed through pyrolysis technology, which it's not burned or incinerated. It's just converted through the process that we have here. Let's see. Pyrolysis is pretty much a treatment applied to any organic carbon-based product. We use high heat in the absence of oxygen to create synthesis gas, and that's what allows us to run our generators and create the 1.2 megawatts of electricity, unlike building out solar farms or wind turbines. So basically, in a small confined space, we're able to get the equivalent amount of power needed for that generation. Our facility right now, we're going to be processing about 4 to 8 trucks a day, which is going to be pre-scheduled and coordinated. We're receiving the waste, which comes in through sealed containers that are generated through local hospitals and medical facilities, that is currently being transported through local and licensed haulers that are already in Rhode Island and throughout New England. We're going to be creating very little emissions, equivalent to what 4 cars produce in a year. We have no wastewater being discharged, so all the any wastewater other than bathroom water or faucets for the sinks is going to be contained in our closed loop system, so nothing gets discharged into the sewer system, so we don't affect any of the discharge there. Any residual material that we generate will be used for asphalt or concrete usage. So any of the inert that is left over is going to be mixed with concrete or asphalt for roadways or any new construction, which is going to be reviewed and approved through DEM. All safety measures and protection are in place and overseen by local and state professionals. Monitoring and all testing done on a regular basis and checked by sensors that will be throughout the whole process and throughout the whole system. We will not accept any radioactive materials. We're going to be working with local licensed haulers that are already licensed and approved by DEM and through the state. We have plenty of fail-safe systems, devices that are already in place, and they have been reviewed by DEM and local authorities. So if we have any shutdown, it shuts down all of the equipment. It locks off all the chambers, and basically we use similar to a submarine locking system. So there's nothing that can affect the environment. Trying to go through this as quickly as possible, but I can share this with Mark as well if anybody needs a copy of it. We have been working with all the authorities on this project, like I mentioned earlier, for about 2 years now with DEM, West Warwick, and also we're trying to be as good of a neighbor with the neighboring town of East Greenwich. We've been working with the local town and their local officials. Let's see here. And then the public process, as you are aware, we started working with the East Greenwich Planning Board. Basically, we brought in a third party that was reviewing our process. They hired a professional independent consultants who reviewed our project and analyzed our process, and we've addressed any questions or concerns. And we're still working to make sure that everything is being done according to the rule of law, as well as environmental and protective safeguards for the facility. Thank you for allowing me to, I guess, introduce our project, and we look forward to answering any questions that anyone has. This is some of our contact information as well.
Do you want to take questions now, Nick, or did you have a technical presentation to give?
We can take questions, and then basically based on those questions, we can revert to whatever technical information, because basically there's a lot of technical behind the system, as you're aware of. We've done some video 3D modeling with your office. We've done extensive reviews. So basically, we can do that if that makes it easier.
Okay, I'm going to ask some questions that have already come in. I'll read some questions that have already come into the chat. The first one was, is this the first of its kind in the country?
As far as pyrolysis has been around for about 30, 40 years. Using it for our process, there was 2 other facilities that were in the U.S. as well. One of the locations that was in Florida, they had a partnership dispute, and they ended up closing up, and they went to, I believe, New Mexico, and they're operating on a tribal facility. Medical waste using pyrolysis is being used all over Europe and throughout the country. So that's pretty much.
That's consistent with my knowledge too. The only one I know of that currently operating is one in New Mexico on Native American land.
Can I just follow up, because it was my question? This is Deborah.
Sure, please do.
So I'm just curious, right? So it was in Florida, some sort of dispute happened, and then they moved. Was it like, Native American land? Was this just because that was the only land that would accept them?
No, that wasn't the case at all. Basically, they did it there because they had received better incentives for the process that they were doing, and the partnership that they had there, they broke up, and that was the reason. But they went through the whole process. They got their permits. The facility was operational, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing.
Okay, and I'm just curious, like, is any part of this Rhode Island based, or was Rhode Island plucked as the next guinea pig, or the next, I guess that's like, how did West Warwick end up as the winner here? And I'm-
Well, basically, you're trying to find out why we went to Rhode Island, basically, you know, how you got the short straws as far as what you're saying. Basically, Rhode Island was very proactive on renewable energy. It was very proactive on job creation. And basically it's centralized in the New England area. And we are also, we thought that was a great spot for us to bring this technology.
Okay. Have another question from Tracy. What type of medical waste will undergo pyrolysis?
What was that? I'm sorry, Mark.
What type of medical, well, I can answer.
We're regulated medical waste that's according to the DEM regulations and requirements.
So sorry, this is Tracy. So are you talking about things that are like biohazard medical waste, blood products, plasma, things of that nature? Or are you talking about plastics that are used in medicinal situations?
We're going to be processing any medical waste that is generated in hospitals and laboratories, whether it is syringes, rubber gloves, blood. Basically, it's any trace chemo or pathological, as well as red bags items. So when you go to your doctors, they have those red containers on there and they put waste in there. That medical waste will come to us. And instead of sterilizing it and throwing it in the landfill, we process it through the pyrolysis technology. So there is no remnants of syringes or any of those medical products that would end up in the current landfill.
So the byproducts of that are going to be an organic substance that can be subsequently used as a filler for concrete or asphalt. But the other byproduct of that is different gases depending upon the items that undergo pyrolysis. So if you're talking about certain plastics, that's certainly toxic gases. So what type of scrubber system do you intend to install to prevent the release of such gases?
We have a thermal oxidizer that cleans all that. We have tarring systems. So we have a multiple step process. And basically by the time it gets to the thermal oxidizer, everything is clean. There's like I said, we produce less emissions than 4 cars produce a year driving, 15,000 miles a year.
Different process though. So, you're kind of comparing apples and oranges, but is this the same scrubber type that is set up in the New Mexico facility?
No, it's different.
And why is that?
We've added the thermal oxidizer to enhance it and make it even cleaner.
And
again, we're not affiliated with the New Mexico facility. We have nothing to do with the New Mexico facility. It's
understood.
It's just another facility that has, that type of technology.
Understood, but comparing the process in each facility with
Richard, do you want to answer Tracy's comments?
Yeah, sure. Tracy, the main thing that we do different to most others is we look at the unique requirements of whatever the waste produces, and then we address that separately. Like, for example, where the material goes in, during the reduction process, we have a negative pressure on the entire system, and that negative pressure goes forth to the thermal oxidizer. So if there are any potential emissions, they are destroyed at that point. Now, it's actually not a requirement in the USA, but it is in Europe, that anything that is emitted is subject to a temperature of 850 degrees C for a minimum of 2 seconds prior to discharge. Now that gets rid of any volatile organic compounds. And if there's anything else that we need to take care of, we can actually add to the thermal oxidizer to reduce whatever the contaminant is. If we move on in the system, as we create the syngas, we have, as you identified when you first spoke, potential contaminants in the gas. Now we take those out progressively in different steps before it gets to the gas collection stage, such that when it goes to the engines, that gas is engine ready. And if anybody is on the call that knows anything about engines, you put anything through to the engine that it doesn't want, that engine will last a few days if you're lucky. So we have engine ready syngas at the end of our system.
Thank you for that, Richard. I've worked at a hazardous waste treatment facility in the past, and I will tell you, despite extensive scrub work use and taking care of all the voltos that you possibly could, nothing's foolproof, right? So the situation is there may be, albeit a small release of some type of gas into an environment where there are young people across the street and children on the same side of the street. Do you think this is an optimal location when most types of hazardous waste treatment facilities are located in heavy industrial areas?
I think if we're relating to possible emissions, your point is very valid. But I think in the case of this facility, the chance of fugitive emissions is zero. And I think that the DEM have been through every possible area of concern, and we have doubly satisfied them. Now, I take your point that things can go wrong, but we have in the system mitigants for whatever could go wrong. For example, if we had a power failure, the negative pressure doesn't operate, then it goes through a filter system via a standby power facility to ensure that we don't get any fugitive emissions even when that occurs. That's just one example, but this has been through several rigorous HAZOPs, and those we actually invited the client plus independent engineers as well, and all those possible areas of concern were signed off. So we're happy to put, I'd be happy to put this in my garden. In fact, I've got one in my garden, but not the size of this facility.
Thank you, Richard, for that information. Do you have any publicly available information concerning test runs you may have done that show, the type of waste that went into the process and output?
We've got more than 400 reports, but most of them were paid for by the potential client. And we couldn't make that information public because they want to maintain that IP for themselves so that they're not creating potential competitors. But we do have some that we've done in-house for our own requirements to de-risk projects for us so that we can put guarantees along with the system and still sleep at night. And there are a couple of those that we could share.
Thank you, Richard, but it sounds like you don't have any third-party situations that have audited the process, but appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I would also note there's a condition in the permit. It's very difficult for us to know for sure that something works that hasn't been built yet. It's like a car, maybe it's a great car, but I want to test this car. So there are provisions in the notice of intent to require facility-specific testing, because I don't think you could possibly convince us that something's going to work that hasn't been built yet. So I do want to mention that. I want to, a few people have their hands raised, and I've got some questions in the comments as well. I want to go to a couple of people that have their hand raised. I haven't forgotten the people in the comments. Karen Rhodes, would you like to speak?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. So, I'm not a scientist, but I have a business that's in the Gardens Office Park right down the street, and I have a home in East Greenwich close by. So obviously my concern is any hazard released from the process. I haven't seen anything that explains exactly what the process is. Has OSHA been involved in this at all and looked at safety protocols and so on?
Well, we're working with DEM and local town officials on all the process and making sure that everything is in compliance. OSHA is not involved until the process of the facility is operational, and then they would come in and make sure that we are operating to make sure that all the safeguards are in place. But pretty much we're alleviating all of that by working with DEM and local town officials to make sure that we have everything in compliance.
Thank you. Pete Skurwitz.
Hi, Assistant Solicitor for the town of East Greenwich. I just wanted to make a quick comment because Mr. Campanella mentioned or stated that he was working with the East Greenwich Planning Board. So I just wanted to correct the record that it's the West Warwick Planning Board, as it's on the West Warwick side of the line, not the East Greenwich side of the line. So we're not permitting the facility. There was a dispute over the air permit for the project that the town of East Greenwich was in with a MedRecycler. And as part of that, we were ordered to mediation. So in that sense, we have discussed the project with them, but we're not permitting the facility. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Tom Oates. Thank you for your patience, by the way. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to give every person a chance. Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Campanella, a question. It's my understanding that you're ready to roll, turn on the lights, open the door at this facility on Division Road. Is this correct?
No, it is not.
It's not.
No.
How far out are you from operation when all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted?
Well, right now we're waiting for DEM, which as Mark Dennen had indicated, the process and the timeline. After that, then we have to go to West Warwick. West Warwick is doing a third-party independent consultant that we're working with to review the process. And then,
My concern was the actual facility itself, as far as all the equipment and materials and so on and so forth, ready to operate the business.
No, nothing is operational right now.
I mean, the equipment, it's valuable equipment. Is there equipment on site?
Yes, the equipment's on site.
So it's on site, but it's not operational yet. But
Correct.
I would say all the permitting is taken care of. How long would it take to start work?
We would have to do testing first and make sure that everything is operational. We'd have to do some test samples, do some coordination with DEM, with the local town officials. Can take 30 days, 60 days, depending on how quick, the testing and the protocols are in place.
Right. But my point is that there is equipment set up in this facility ready to go for testing.
No, there's no equipment ready for testing. Everything's in there. It's in staging process, but nothing is ready to go.
Okay. And where does this sit on the for business licensing to actually have the license to operate a business?
I'm not sure that we'd have to check with West Warwick, but I don't believe that we need to have a business license.
Oh, you don't need a business license?
Not that I'm aware of at this point.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, sir.
I have one question, and I don't know if this one last question, Mr. Dennen, and I'm not sure if this can be answered. I'm wondering if there is anybody from the town of West Warwick, town council, or anything of that nature on this Zoom. I know there's 97 participants.
I'm not sure. I'll allow maybe someone from West Warwick if they can tell me if they're here. I can tell you that we did personally notify the town administrator of West Warwick as well as the fire chief in West Warwick. We also notified the town of East Greenwich and the fire chief in East Greenwich as well. We've sent them all copies of the public notice so that they could participate if they saw fit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Okay, Kevin Boudris.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kevin Boudris. I work with an organization called Conservation Law Foundation. I have a few questions that I'll try to be pretty quick with so as not to abuse my time in any way. You talked, Mr. Campanella, a bit about the amount of energy that can be generated, presumably from burning the synthetic gas on site. How does the amount of energy that can be generated from that burning compare to the amount of energy that will be required to run the entire facility, in particular the pyrolysis chamber itself?
Well, first of all, we're not burning, we're heating from an outside chamber. So we're heating the process, and basically our facility, out of the 1.2 to 1.3 megawatts, we will be using about 200 kW to operate our facility.
But you are burning the synthetic fuel on site to generate electricity, correct?
Richard, if you want to respond to Mr. Burgess.
Yes, the clean syngas will go through to the engines, and it'll be just like any other engine that runs on gas or on gasoline. It'll operate at stoichiometric conditions, giving us the minimum emissions for the given output.
Great. And when it comes to the, you had mentioned earlier, Richard, that before the synthetic gas goes to the engines, tars, olefins, other contaminants will be removed from the syngas through a series of scrubbers. What happens to those materials? Where do they go?
Okay, they go into an oxidation chamber below the pyrolysis unit, and that provides the majority of the heat input. That's why we've got so much available to go to the engines.
So those things that are removed from the synthetic gas are burned in a chamber to generate heat for the pyrolysis process.
Correct.
So that which you are removing from the syngas is burned on site.
It's burned within enclosed conditions, and then those gases go through to the thermal oxidizer before discharge.
Kevin and Richard, if I could interrupt for just a moment, I just want to make sure people are aware who are following this, talk about incineration versus pyrolysis and what's the difference. Pyrolysis and incineration both heat the material. The difference, what makes pyrolysis different, is that it's in an oxygen deficient environment. So if it had enough oxygen, it would be incineration. But by depriving it of oxygen, it's called pyrolysis. So it breaks down into a flammable gas that is then burned for fuel. Please feel free to correct me if I said something wrong, but I just want to make sure
No,
everyone follow what we're talking about.
That's a very good qualification.
Richard, if I could just ask one more question, because there was mention of the inert residues, solid residues from the process being used in concrete and pavement. Are there any non-inert solid residues from the process, and what happens to those?
Fortunately, I can answer you that there are no non-inert residues. The discharge is inert, and there's no non-inert residues.
But what about the tar?
The tar goes to the vitrification chamber below the pyrolysis unit.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had mentioned that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all for your time. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, Elizabeth McNamara, I know you've been on here a long time and have been great patient as well. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, sorry, yes, thank you. It has to do with the financing. Sorry, somebody called me just as this was happening. Has to do with the financing. You had mentioned, Mr. Campanella, about the state being proactive in terms of your decision to come to Rhode Island. Is that the 17 million that you will get once you are operational? You had mentioned that you have all private financing. Is that contingent on once you get going, then you get public funding, and that's what made it appealing to come to Rhode Island?
No,
Elizabeth McNamara, East Greenwich News, just to be clear.
yeah, that's not the reason why we came to Rhode Island. Basically, we're using private equity bonds, and we have one of our investors who is taking the whole bond allocation for our project. So we're not using taxpayer dollars. We're not using any money from the state other than just using the mechanism or the vehicle to procure private equity bonds for our one investor that we have.
So the Rhode Island, sorry, hold on here. The sale of bonds. Sorry about this. Too many things going on. Rhode Island Industrial Facilities Corp. did approve in 2019, $17 million. I mean, maybe there's some explanation I'm missing. Is there a way for you to explain what that is?
Yeah, basically, it has nothing to do with DEM or with our license, but basically the 17 million that we're allocating for our financing. Again, we're using private equity bonds, which is one investor that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and he's the funding source for our project. We're only using the bond mechanism, and basically Rhode Island has a process that they allow us to use private equity bonds through the state. Again, there's no money paid by the state. There's no investment by the state. It's our own private funding.
Then why do you need the state money? Sorry.
We're not taking any state money. There's no state money being given to us.
So that's 17 million that
It's just a vehicle that the state allows us to be able to issue tax-free bonds to our investors.
tax-free bonds. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Mark, you muted.
Thank you for telling me. I have a question here, and by the way, thank you to the town of East Greenwich for being here, because you may be helpful in answering this question. What were the concerns raised by the independent consultant? And I believe they're talking about the consultant hired by the town of East Greenwich. And how was the issue, quote, resolved, unquote?
Peter.
Do you want me to take that one, Mark?
If you'd like.
I can. I also see that a member of the East Greenwich Council has the hand raised. So they may have been referring to the East Greenwich consultant because we did hire a consultant. They may have been referring to a West Warwick consultant because I believe through the planning process in West Warwick, they were hiring a separate consultant.
You know, why don't I ask Christine Berger if you can unmute yourself and please clarify for us your question. Okay. Okay, I guess I should let her clarify that first. Mr. Donegan, you have your hand raised.
I do. Thank you, Mark. Hi, Mark. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
So I'm not here, Mark, as you know, is in my usual capacity with DEM. I'm here as the Vice President of the Town Council in East Greenwich. I just wanted to note that we have 4 of our council members on this Zoom. We have Rainey Engelhardt, Karen Korenthal, our President Mark Schweiger. Mike Zarella thought he might be in court and unable to participate and get back in time. I did want to say that the council has, we have no jurisdiction over this project. We got notice as abutters. And we hired GZA, Geo-Environmental, a well-known consulting firm that everyone who does this work is aware of. We're working with Ed Summerly and Rick Carlone there. So we got notice of the DEM air permit that had been issued. We only after the fact. We under the process, we don't get prior notice as the abutter, and as a minor source. We appealed that. We hired GZA to look at it based upon their recommendations. We appealed that, as did New England Tech. And that litigation is pending. And that's what, by the way, we also have two of our solicitors who are dealing with this on the Zoom anyway, Peter, who's already spoken, and Andy Tights, who's there. So in that litigation, the court ordered us to mediation, and we're engaged in that mediation process. The specific recommendations made by GZA that we're trying to incorporate in through negotiations into the air permit, and may also go into the solid waste license that we're talking about. Those are the subject of a negotiation right now with the developer, Mr. Campanella's group. And so I'm not sure if it's appropriate for us to comment at this point, especially in an informational meeting. I assume we'll have this resolved one way or the other by the time there's an actual licensing public hearing where evidence is taken, but I will defer for the moment to our solicitor. I do want to recognize that and thank our state senator, Bridget Valverde, and our state representative, Justine Caldwell, who also are participating in this important process. So thank you both. Peter, do you have is it appropriate for us to discuss the many and diverse conditions that we're discussing with Mr. Campanella?
So what I would say, Mike, at this point is that, I think it's public record that we did file that appeal and we did litigate that. It's also public record that we were ordered to mediation. But because of the rules governing the mediation, I think at this point, since they're still ongoing, we shouldn't get into the substance of what was discussed. But, depending on how that results, that may be something that would be public at a later point in time.
Okay. All right. So Mark, I guess we can't comment on there are many conditions that on the air permit and the solid waste license that have been identified by GZA and the council. And we've been engaged with Mr. Campanella and his team to try to work through a lot of those. And at the moment, we're mediating. And so that's kind of where we have to leave that, I think.
All right, thank you. I just, because the question had come up.
Mark.
Yes, I think Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, Mike Kelly wants to
Do
comment.
you want to comment as well on this issue?
Yes, I do think, and I agree with Mr. Squires that it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss the contents of mediation. I just generally want to say that the applicant has worked long and hard to try and satisfy the concerns of not only East Greenwich, but any other residents that have a concern about this project. And we'll continue to work with them, and we're confident that working together, we could work out any issues that the town of East Greenwich has. They've suggested through their consultant and also Mr. Donegan, many additional issues that they'd like addressed, which we've, I believe, addressed about each and every one of them. So at some point in the future, we have a resolution. We're hoping to be able to present all of those because I believe that they will satisfy a lot of concerns that residents have. Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Kelly, for muting you. I've been trying to keep the mute buttons on except for the speakers to make the communication better.
Problem, Mark.
Okay.
No problem. I've been muted many times before.
Nothing personal. Will be another question is, and I have a question here. Someone has a hand raised, but it only says iPhone, so I can't tell who you are. Okay, So I'll go on to questions in the chat box. Will you be processing COVID waste and medical textile waste? And I'm not sure exactly what's meant by medical textile waste, but let me ask the question of you.
We're going to be processing whatever medical waste underneath our DEM permit that is permitted and allowed. As far as COVID waste, I believe that everything that is operational out of the hospitals are considered to have some sort of COVID expectation. Basically, someone that's at home that has a mask and throws it in the garbage and they just recovered from COVID, it's going to be processed through a clean process and disposed of properly and according to regulations that are designated by DEM.
I just want to mention, having Yen and I have been involved with medical waste for several decades, just to give you an idea of what medical waste typically is from other facilities, not to say it'll be exactly the same, but our experience has been a lot of it is rubber gloves, tubing, towels, and those kind of wraps and textiles, as well as needles and other hard instruments. The majority of the volume is probably plastic and plastic related materials when it gets shredded. And that's what, when people refer to in this industry, if you hear the term thrown around tonight, red bag waste, when you go to visit your doctor and they have a bloody gauze or something, that goes in a trash can with a red bag liner. That's typically non-sharp items are red bag waste. That'll also be a lot of exam gloves and that kind of thing. And then the other kind of waste people talk about is sharps waste. And that'll be needles or anything that can break that has been in contact with blood or body fluid. Typically, the vast majority of it is needles, okay? All right. Okay, is the federal EPA, I'm going to take this one, is the federal EPA involved in the approval process? Federal EPA is not directly involved in the review process, but the EPA does have air pollution control regulations, and those are delegated to the state. So similarly, solid and hazardous waste, EPA does have regulations that are delegated to the state. So although they are not directly involved with the review process, they are their requirements are relevant. The state has the right and often is more stringent than the Environmental Protection Agency, but we cannot be less stringent. If anybody wants to add to that, please do. What is the forecasted volume of waste to be processed per year? Nick, why don't you take that?
Right now, we're looking at anywhere from 35 to 70 tons per day, which is the equivalent of 4 trucks. So basically, we're looking to process at 70 tons per day. We're looking at four trucks per day with a maximum of 6 to 8 trucks per day, which is something that we've been working with local authorities and officials.
Thank you. Why here in East Greenwich and not at Quonset, which is where it is primarily industry?
We looked at Quonset, and basically we would have had to build our own building, and it wasn't cost effective to do so.
Right, thank you. I should mention that part of our department's review process, we don't tell the applicant where to locate. The applicant files an application, and it's our job to decide whether or not the application meets the requirements. And if they abandon this application and tomorrow came up with one for Providence or Woonsocket, we would give that application a fair review as well. We give a fair review to everyone who submits an application. We're not empowered to tell them where they should be located. Okay. Mr. Donegan, did you have another question?
I did. I just wanted to say, as to the local siting questions, this doesn't meet this isn't sort of a power project that meets the Energy Facility Siting Board thresholds where the state would decide on location and look at site alternatives. That's purely a local question and whether West Warwick is going to allow it or not. That kind of dovetails with the reason I raised my hand was that I know that we are well represented here with all but one of our council members and 2 of our lawyers. And I was wondering whether we have our senator and our rep. I was wondering if we could sound off and find out who's actually on this Zoom call from West Warwick.
Okay. If anyone is here from the town of West Warwick, could you please identify yourself, unmute yourself and identify yourself? And I mean officials from West Warwick.
Hi, Mark.
Yes.
Mark Dennen. This is Mark Carula. I'm the town planner in West Warwick.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other West Warwick officials here?
And
Do you know? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Representative Patricia Serpa would be my district.
Oh, Tracy Sherpa?
This is Representative Patricia Serpa.
Okay,
Serpa, SERPA.
okay. Thank you. Thank you for
And I
identifying
have a
yourself.
question when you get to it.
Yes, I did see you had your hand raised and I was just,
Hand raised
I was
for
going
a
to call you
question.
next, but let me just make sure, see if there's anyone else from the town of West Warwick or elected officials from West Warwick here.
Sure.
Senator John Burke from District 9.
Senator Burke, welcome. Anyone else? Okay, so we do have representation from the town of West Warwick as city or town, I forget which is correct.
City.
We're a town.
Oh, town.
Town? Town of West Warwick. I know it's town of East Greenwich, town of West Warwick. Forgive me if I say city by mistake. Pat Sherpa, would you?
Serpa.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
actually Serpa, SERPA.
SERPA. Okay, would you care to ask a question?
Yes, actually, it's a comment and a question. Someone indicated earlier, Mr. Campanella, it may have been you. You indicated that you are trying to be friendly towards the neighborhoods and be a good neighbor. And I didn't know if you meant in terms of the technology that you are using, because as I understand it, neither the residents of nearby East Greenwich and nearby West Warwick were notified. They received no formal notification. And I would just think that that would be the first step in being a good neighbor.
When I meant to say good neighbor is we're doing whatever we need to do to make everyone feel comfortable. As far as notification, that was done when we first started the project through the town of West Warwick. So notifications were given, public notice was issued. So we did follow the rules and regulations that are set up from the town and required permitting process.
Thank you. Okay, I've got another question. When are these trucks arriving and departing?
Basically, we're going to have trucks and deliveries scheduled by appointments only. So as we process the waste that comes in and the waste has gone through our system, that's when we'll request for the scheduling of the next truck. So like I said, we're going to be processing 4 trucks a day, as many as 6 to 8 if needed, but they will be regulated and delivered based on scheduled times that we have.
I've got a question. Justine Caldwell has her hand up.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for hosting this informational session today, everyone. So I'm the state rep for East Greenwich, Chairwoman Serpa's colleague, and I also live a stone's throw away from where this facility would be. Like the chairwoman and the members of our town council, all I have heard is extreme concerns from my constituents and my neighbors regarding this project. And I understand that we're having this public hearing. You know, there's obviously a lot of science happening that certainly those of us at home, you know, may have a hard time understanding ourselves or figuring out. And I understand this is the kickoff of a month-long public comment process. But, you know, what else are we going to learn in this month before this public hearing to help folks like me either communicate with my constituents about this issue or whether or not we should be supporting this this facility? You know, I could not at all, of course, support it now that every single person who lives in my district reaches out to me and is vehemently opposed to it. So, you know, I'm just wondering if this informational session is the end and then there's a month of public comment and, you know, followed by what? It would be nice to get some more info and not wait a month for that to happen. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Caldwell, basically, the people that had questions, we've tried to address as much as possible. We've redesigned our website to make it more informative and be able to explain to everybody what the process is. We've been working diligently with East Greenwich, with Mike and Peter and Mr. Tights and their whole team, working with the engineers that they brought forward to us to review our process and to make everyone feel comfortable and understand what we're doing. So, you know, we are doing whatever we need to make everyone comfortable and understand the process. And unfortunately, there was a lot of misconceptions in the beginning and people were just running with their own ideas without knowing the truth behind the process and what we were actually doing.
I would also, I do want to, in case anyone missed it at the beginning, we have posted the notice of intent to approve. We have also posted the public notice and we've posted the application itself in addition to a technical document relative to the application. But
Yeah,
if there's anything more that we can do, if there's more information that people need, a different kind of information, I've encouraged people and I'll continue to encourage you, please either put your email in the chat box or send me or Yen Lee an email separately that we can have an email list where we give any other information. If there's Representative Caldwell, if you would care to meet with us, and is there more that we could do, something better that we could do to get information out to the public, we'd certainly like to hear.
Yeah, and if you'd like also, you can reach out to me. I can go through the whole process and make it more clearer if you need to. If you want to go on our website and look at some of the responses to the process, but I'm more than happy to go through it with you and answer any of your concerns.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I'll contact both of you in regards to that. Maybe we can get some info out. What we want to avoid, obviously, is a month of public comment and then a surprise to constituents right after that with a decision.
Mark, would you think that maybe if we did our 3D modeling and Richard can go through the process and how everything works?
I would encourage you to do anything that that you feel would better get your message out and that people feel. So
yeah,
also,
Richard,
if you would care to share your contact information with everyone, where can people go to get more information from you? I think that would be helpful as well.
yeah, they can go to our website, which is www.medrecycler.com. So it's medrecycler.com, and we have a Q&A section there, so you can ask whatever questions.
Why don't you go ahead and put that in the chat to everyone?
Sure. This is new. Richard, do you want to set up the 3D modeling to show everybody how the process, and maybe if you can give them a little explanation of how the system works for us?
If you're not prepared to do that at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry guys, I didn't unmute before I put the screen up. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to rotate it so that we can see what is there. That's the bottom of the building. Okay, at the point where the cursor is now, that is the incoming shredder. So if we take those rollers at the front, we have sealed boxes that have not been adulterated by anyone that is subject for transport, and they are placed on this conveyor. They then go into the shredder, which is this item here, and that shredder will macerate the components, bring it down to a uniform size, and then move it through to the dryer, which is this item here. The dryer takes it down in temperature, takes it down in moisture. You see the suction off the top there. That takes it through to the regenerative thermal oxidizer, which is this item here, before exit to the stack. Now from the dryer, we then go to a pre-pyrolyzer, which is to prepare it for pyrolysation, take it up to a temperature where some of the volatiles will be taken off and then taken care of. And then we go into the pyrolyzer, which is this item here. We have two of them, one there and one here. And then following the exit of the syngas, we go into 2 of 3 gas cleanup systems. Now, the reason we've got 3 is that one is always on standby. So if the gas cleanup system should be found to be less effective, then we automatically go across to the standby one, and this gas cleanup system will then go into the cleanup mode. And then that one, after maybe half an hour to an hour, will be available as a standby. The gas gets pumped into this gasometer here, which is basically storing the gas for a limited period to homogenize prior to it going through to the engines. Now the engines are all contained in containers outside the building, and that will give us the energy to the control panel, which is at a position here. And anyone that's working in the facility in the offices can review the control panel from there. So effectively, as the hospital waste comes in, as essentially hospital waste, the only thing that goes out is electricity. The clean emissions, which are well within the regulatory requirements, and then the residue from the base of the pyrolyzer, which at worst can go to an inert landfill, and at best it will go into some form of road fill. Now the main thing here is, and I was going to ask to speak earlier, so I may as well do it now, is that we've now converted 70 tons of hospital waste that 50 years ago would have gone on a landfill and been available for children to play in and cut themselves and become damaged by it, to only 7% of that original 70 tons goes out as inert landfill. So if we compare that with the alternative, which has been used in the US for many tens of years, which is autoclaving, all the autoclave does is sterilize it and then put it all to landfill. So in our view, we've only gone part way to the destruction that we should. Okay, we may be a little bit biased on the basis with the supplier of the equipment, and we're very proud of what we do, but this is the answer for medical waste. No emissions, preserving the landfill space, and getting rid of what would otherwise be contaminant waste. Well, I've got this up on the screen. Are there any questions?
Richard, this might be a really good time to ask a question that came in the chat box. How is hydrochloric acid used in pyrolysis?
We remove it in the pre-pyrolysis section. At this point, we can volatilize the PVC components in the hazardous waste, and we can then collect it, and it becomes available as a commodity. Everyone has gone quiet. Am I still online?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, you're still here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Is it a noisy process?
The noisiest part of the system are the engines themselves. That's why we put them in containers and we attenuate them. So if you were to open the door of the container, you would get the noise that you don't want to hear. The next noise emitter would be the macerator, but again, that is contained. And then the third in line would be the combustion air fans that operate at fairly high pressure, but again, they are individually attenuated. So if I answered your question, there's no noise, I'd be telling the truth, but it's through attenuation that we don't emit it.
Yeah, all the noise is contained within the facility, so it would be similar to standard manufacturing or warehouse noise.
What about the trucks delivering the waste? Is it 24/7 or are they limited to normal business hours?
It would be 24/7, but as I mentioned to you, we'll be getting 4 trucks a day. So right now, the facility is a 540,000 square foot warehouse that has a lot of trucks coming in and out all day long and all night long. Our facility would only be accepting 4 trucks during the course of business. So it's very limited amount of trucks. Richard, if you want to explain maybe the macerator and how small it makes the particles. And is there if you can turn the rendering a little bit, it looks a little off-sided.
Let me just take you back to normal position. Yeah, it's not increase the size. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, basically what we're doing is we're going to be taking in up to 4 trucks, maybe a little bit more during the course of the day. So we use telescopic conveyors to offload from the truck into the conveyor and into the macerator. And then from the macerator, which is the grinder, it goes through different processing system. Go ahead, Richard. Yeah, that's better. That's better rendering.
Yeah. So effectively, the box comes in, nobody touches it. The first time is opened is by the macerator itself, and this is a fully sealed chamber. We have a negative pressure applied at this point here through to the thermal oxidizer. So that makes sure we get no egress from the facility. And any liquids that are created as a consequence of breaking up the bags and whatever's in the box that will come down to the bottom, and they are in a sealed conveyor that go through to the dryer. So effectively, at the exit of the dryer, we've performed exactly what a autoclave would do in terms of decontaminating the waste. We should have no pathogens left at that point. I'm saying we should because it's at the same temperature as in an autoclave, but it still remains in a sealed system going through to the pre-pyrolyzer and the pyrolyzer.
So once it gets to the first system, everything is sterile as it's being currently done through autoclaves and then just brought to a landfill.
Yeah. As I said earlier, the difference is that we are eliminating more than 93% of the waste, which obviously extends the life of the landfill, and it's only inert material, and there's no shops. So nobody's going to hurt themselves with what goes to the landfill.
All right, I see Magdalena Andriozzi has a question.
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking my question. Just I've been by this facility. I live in West Warwick. My first question is, what is the time frame of the process of this? So when a truck comes in, and how long will it take to get from the beginning to the end to where all the activity is happening, in the exterior of the buildings?
All the process is done on the inside of the building. So basically a truck will back up to the loading dock. We use a telescopic conveyor to offload it. So basically Richard, how long can a tractor trailer be processed through the whole system?
Yeah, when we are at full throughput, the 70 tons per day, and there are 8 trucks going in there, then on the basis that this plant is operating 24/7, it will be 24 hours divided by 8. So the in-process time will be 3 hours. When we're running at half capacity, which is the intent, then we'll only be running 1 train of equipment. So the in-process time is essentially still the same.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, what about overflow? Are they going to be held in containers inside the building, outside the building, or what's the process for that?
There should be no overflow because we're going to have everything scheduled by appointment. So as the material arrives in the tractor trailer, it's going to be offloaded and processed through the system as it arrives. So there's going to be nothing sitting around or laying around, no trucks outside with storage of any sort.
Thank you. How do you plan to do the ramp up from 4 to 8 trucks?
Well, basically the maximum that we could process is 70 tons. So whether it's 1 truck that, basically we were figuring on 4 trucks because the tractor trailer is anywhere from 50 to 53 feet. So based on the size of boxes that are on the tractor trailer, that's how we figured it was going to be about 4 tractor trailers to a maximum of 6, depending on the size of the trucks or depending on the size of the load that's picked up from the hospitals or the laboratories.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Just trying to visualize and see how the whole operation, big picture kind of thing. And when do you think?
This is pretty much a small facility. Again, to process 7, when you think about it, 70 tons sounds a lot, but when you think about it, it's only 4 trucks or 4 tractor trailer loads a day. And as Richard indicated, we're going to be processing it, in a safe manner. And that's why we invested in this technology as far as having telescopic conveyors and different conveyor systems. So this way, even our employees and staff do not have to touch anything, and pretty much just comes in a box, and it has a sealed bag inside it. So they're not touching it. They're not recycling anything. So it all goes into the macerator and processed as it comes in. So there's really not too much hand holding for the employees or any issues that would incur.
And if I could just break in for a moment, just to mention, the application calls for a maximum of 25 trailers on site. and a maximum of 20 containers in the building. The way our regulations work, whatever the maximum that you can have is what you have to post a financial assurance bond for. So that, and this isn't just medical waste, this is all waste. Whatever you're going to take on site, you take the maximum of what could be there. You have to put the money aside so that should the company leave for whatever reason, the state could take that money and use that money for the cleanup of the property. I was just wondering if you could, if people would indulge me for just one moment. I'd like to take just 3 minutes. My throat is getting dry. I'd like to take 3 minutes to just get a drink. Could we have a 3-minute rest and then we'll continue? That's all right with everyone. Or you can continue without me, but okay. I'll be right back.
Okay, during this 3-minute recess, I'd just like to answer the question that was asked before. As far as the ramp up is concerned, I've turned the model on its head so that you can see the plan view, and you see clearly there's 2 trains there. Only when we get to the 35 tons a day input would the second train be switched on, other than initial commissioning. We'll obviously commission the whole plant, make sure everything is working as it should and all the interlocks are in place and all the safety devices work. And then 1 train will be left unused until we get to 50% capacity.
Say that. Thank you. I appreciate for clarifying that. Hey, Mark.
Thank you, everyone, for indulging me. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Speak.
Would there any, this is Magdalena speaking. Would there any possible way be an opportunity for like a site visit or kind of like a walk around?
That's up to Mr. Campanella. It's not something that's required by our regulations, but I'll let him address that.
Yeah, right now, there's really nothing other than equipment to look at, just in the warehouse. There's really nothing set up. So, you know, I don't mind giving you a tour of the facility, but again, there's really nothing nothing in place or nothing piped or anything like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a question from Amy Petrino, or at least she has her hand up.
Thank you, Mark. There are not trucks going in there 24 hours a day right now, Mr. Campanella. I would be very surprised if anybody knew about the travel of trucks going in there more than I do, seeing as I live across the street from your facility. They do not operate 24 hours a day. The other companies that are in there work regular hours. The only time that there are trucks in there during the middle of the night is if it snows there are trucks over there to plow. So if your trucks are running 24/7, you will be the only one that will have things going on there in the middle of the night. When we first met at the West Warwick planning meeting, which was almost 2 years ago now, you told me that there were going to be trucks outside, cargo containers containing generators, and that the noise level of those generators would be under a certain, whatever your number was.
Right.
Can you explain that? Because you're saying that there is no noise from this process. And I think that you're leaving out the fact that those things are all going to be outside the building.
Well, as Richard had pointed out, we have three cargo containers, which are those blue containers up top. That's where the generators are inside. So what we did is we put them inside cargo containers to reduce the noise. And basically it's facing the I-95 side, and the decibel level is below the minimum allowable by the town and by the state.
So what is that level?
I don't know off the top of my head. Richard, do you know what the decibel levels are for the enclosed containers?
I know that the regulations worldwide are around about 85 dBA. And inside the containers, it will be in excess of that, but they are fully enclosed.
Enclosed in what, Richard?
Say that again?
They're inside cargo containers.
But they're outside the building.
Correct.
The containers are outside the building, yes.
But the engines are inside the cargo containers.
For those of us who don't know what 85 is, what is that going to be? You know, what are we comparing that noise level to?
It would be similar to a smaller size generator that people would have outside their home, but just in a larger scale, and it would still meet the required decibel level that, and that's why we also put them inside the storage, inside the cargo containers to reduce it even further.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to exemplify on that a little bit more. We have noise attenuating insulation on the inside of the containers. So if you go to those containers when they're running, you would feel as though you were just aside of a normal car, probably doing 500 revs. So you would know that the guy's got his foot on the accelerator, but no damning noise. Now, as far as I'm aware, the regulations are the same worldwide. You go 3 meters from the noise emitting source, and that's where you measure it. I'd be surprised if it's more than 3/4 what is allowable during the night. During the night, obviously people need to sleep. So if you are any distance away, you will not hear it.
I'm not any distance away. I'm across the street. I can hear 95 all night long if my window is open. So when you Googled what causes noise and hearing loss, according to the CDC, it says that 85 decibels of sound intensity could damage your hearing over time. And it's the same as running a constant leaf blower.
A washing machine or dishwasher is at 70, and city traffic while you're inside a car is about 80 to 85. A motorcycle is about 95. So that's the comparison. And
Yeah,
also,
it's-
again, we put
it's
it on
much less than that.
Yeah, we put it on the side facing 95. And by the time we get to your house, it's probably, a good, half a mile away?
No. So the other question that I have is, how often is this facility going to be tested? And if for some reason there is some kind of failure or some kind of incident, how long is that going to be until the public finds out?
Well, basically, all our equipment has monitoring and sensor systems on it. So if there's any failure, we would know right away. Plus, once we start operational, I think DEM and the town will be our new best friend from coming there so often to watch and monitor everything that we're doing. So that I would leave up to Mark as far as how often we're going to be monitored and regulated.
And then what's the plan for expansion?
Right now, we're pretty much capped off at what we want to do at that site. So I do not believe we'll do more than the 70 tons or the four trucks per day.
Richard, you might want to stop sharing your screen right now.
Okay, I was looking for the document, but I can share it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were looking for documents. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were done. Pardon me. If there's
No,
documents.
it's okay. I've stopped sharing my screen. I'll find the document and then I'll request permission.
Okay, I thought you just didn't realize you were still sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Please let me know if you want to share. Please feel free to. There's something that can help. All right, I guess Bridget Valverde, you have a question.
Hi there, thank you, Mark. This is Bridget Valverde. I'm the senator representing East Greenwich. In the same vein of one of Amy's questions, Mark, could you describe after the facility becomes operational, what kind of ongoing emissions and safety oversight will this project be subject to by DEM?
Well, first there's the legal, what we legally have the rights and ability to do, and those don't always equate to what we have the resources to do. I mean, if we wanted to, we could go in during any business hours and do an unannounced inspection. That being said, I would be very disingenuous if I told you we were going to be there in perpetuity on a weekly basis, because we don't do that with other medical waste facilities, and I don't think we'd have the personnel to do that. We do unannounced inspections on all of our permitted facilities, including medical waste facilities. I would imagine in the beginning, we're going to be there a lot more. The first step would be to do a validation testing, because this process involves shredding of medical waste that's not yet been treated. And that is something that needs a high level of scrutiny, because there's the potential to release airborne contamination. So that initial study is going to be to do two things: to show the process works, and we put biological, and I hope I don't go into too much detail here. We have monitoring that's required. First, that you do temperature monitoring to show that you reach temperature to get your kill, but we also put heat-resistant bacterial spores in the waste to show that you do in fact kill them, and then you try to grow the spores on the other end. The assumption is that if you can kill the most heat-resistant bacteria, then you can kill less heat-resistant bacteria. So there's the two parts of that. You have to show, first of all, that your process is efficacious in that it had an efficacy to get the appropriate kill, which is 10 to the minus 6, or 1 million spores, kill all of them. But also that you can show that your process is really self-contained, that there is no, there's nothing that can leak out of there. And that's going to be a process involving spiking the waste with certain indicator bacteria and shredding it and testing outside of the facility. So it's going to be a very involved procedure, and we're going to need to, if we're not there, we're going to need to have a third party that we hire to be there to observe that and to be able to split samples, because that's only prudent. That's the initial startup. After the initial startup, we'll do unannounced inspections as we normally do, but we may also respond to complaints. And I can't, it's hard to do, you can't really validate that it works without the equipment being in place and working. So that's going to be the process. Is that too convoluted an explanation?
No, that was good. But what about monitoring sort of emissions from the facility? Not just, the efficacy of of killing any spores, that kind of thing, but.
Okay, well, there's two things, and not to be bureaucratic, but there are two different permits here, and their permit with us the things like monitoring for the potential for contaminants to be, for micro bacteria, viruses, things to be released, that's us. And we do that. We require those kinds of tests to see that you have what we call an efficacious process. But there's also, they have an air permit. So in terms of how much benzene gets into the air, how many particulates get into the air, whether there's visible emissions, there's a separate, separately trained inspectors that would do inspections in accordance with their air permit. Now, things like noise, that's going to be a local issue.
Okay. How often would those inspections happen?
That's hard to say. We look at all of our facilities on at least a yearly basis, but part of it is what your concerns are, and we have the right to do inspections as often as we see fit, but we also have personnel limitations that we can't do an unlimited number of inspections.
Mark, also, as far as our air quality permit, I believe that we have to do keep monitoring reports, and we have to submit them to DEM on a regular basis.
And I believe the draft conditions require that they do a biological test every 40 hours of
Correct.
operation.
Yes, I believe so.
So that's if the machine operated 8 hours a day, that's weekly testing. But if the machine operated 24 hours a day, that's every other day. And that's pretty standard in the industry. That's pretty standard for other kinds of treatment like autoclave, that you do one biological test per 40 hours. But you also need to have continuous monitoring so that if you don't reach temperature, that you've got to stop, and you've got to maintain those logs so that when we go in an unannounced inspection and we say, show me your temperature logs for yesterday.
Mark, where is autoclaving being used currently in Rhode Island?
In Stericycle in Woonsocket,
Yep.
and at Rhode Island Hospital, which also has their own licensed treatment system.
And what do they do with the autoclave stuff that gets processed at the hospital?
The autoclave, after the material is autoclaved, neither of those facilities currently shreds the material. So it's been treated, but it has not been destroyed. So it is considered a regulated medical waste when it leaves the facility. It's treated, but it's still regulated. And the facility in Woonsocket, I believe, sends it out of state for incineration. The facility in Providence, Rhode Island Hospital, I can't remember if they send it for incineration or if it goes to the landfill. I can't remember.
Right, so if it goes to, let's say, hypothetically to the landfill, you're going to look at it and it's going to still be in its present form.
Yes, it's been autoclaved.
Right,
So
it's
realistically, you can tell when something's been autoclaved.
Correct, right, okay.
But because it hasn't been shredded, it's still regulated.
Right, and basically with our monitoring and our equipment.
You know, I don't think that now that I think of it, no, that doesn't go to central because it's not been destroyed.
Right.
Us go to incineration.
Now, as Mark said, all our equipment's going to be monitored and has sensors, and we have to have daily logs. So if DEM comes in 6 months from now and asks us for the temperature or the processing content of today's waste, we have to, and we will have those reports and those documentation where we can specifically tell them at 3 o'clock, the temperature was this, this, and this. So we do have those redundant backup systems and control systems to comply with DEM's information.
Senator Valverde, did you have another question, or is your hand just still up?
Oh, no, my hand's just still up. Thanks.
Okay, I'll lower it. Thank you.
Okay.
Mike Donegan.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Valverde. So I was wondering, in my experience in these sorts of licenses and the conditions, in this one, due to what you just described, how you're going to do the surrogate testing and have protocols and all of that, it might be of interest to the public to know what those protocols are before they're implemented. And the way it's set up, there's no way anyone would know. That just comes after a license is granted. And I would say that's true of several of the plans, protocols, et cetera, that are there. And I was wondering if you intend to make that part of the licensing process, because if they're just conditioned, the public doesn't even get to validate the efficacy of the protocols.
Actually, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I published, we've gone through, I don't know how many iterations of this testing protocol we've gone through and asked for changes. It's probably been 8 or 10 times. But they are, I believe the medical efficacy testing protocols are published on the website along with the notice and the permit application.
Right.
We do also have in the notice of intent to approve, we also had a number of conditions, and some of those conditions relate to what kind of efficacy testing they have to do. The efficacy testing protocol that they gave us didn't have as much detail as we wanted. So I think we said prior to the efficacy testing, we have to have a more detailed plan submitted to us. Because on these efficacy testing, the devil's in the details. I can make up a test that'll pass, and I can make up a test that'll fail. And what I want to do, a test is reasonable. If I haven't already published that, in fact, while we're having other questions, I'll go check and make sure that that is published. Also, I will, everybody that's given me their email address, I will send them out a link to that. I will warn you that it's pretty involved, but that being said, please feel free to talk to us. We've talked to EPA about that. We've talked to other states. These issues. You've
gone through a lot.
There's a lot of judgment calls here. There's
Right.
a lot of judgment calls when you're talking about an efficacy testing program, and you could always come up with something more or less stringent and justify it. And by all means, I'd encourage. And by the way, GZA submitted, as I recall, they submitted comments on that efficacy testing program, all the protocol. Sorry, that
So I don't know where you
were
got
very
that.
helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you got that, because are you talking about as a license condition that we're talking about now?
Well, they also, part of their application was the efficacy testing protocols, because that was a big issue.
Right. No, I was wondering about GZA, who works for the town of East Greenwich.
Yes.
My understanding is the only comments we've provided are through the mediation. And so if you have something else, I'd be interested in that.
No, I don't think I do have something, but I think we were given, I think through the mediation, we were given a whole list of technical comments from GZA.
Sure, but so we may have seen some of that.
Okay.
I was just thinking that, as you mentioned, there are many judgment calls around this, how that would work. And
I
as
think
evidenced by the fact that
I think you saw all of the GZA documents, being that they were hired by East Greenwich, and being that DEM was also involved in the suit. That's why they had a copy of the GZA report.
But please follow up with me.
Sure. What I was going to say, Mark, it was that, we may have our opinions and our experts may have their opinions. The general public hasn't seen that. And I was wondering if you're going to provide that information. And what I'm referring to is, even if you've already seen a draft, if you've commented and want additional information, right, in order to refine what the protocols would be, that's something the public won't see if what you do is just condition it upon a subsequent submission.
Okay.
And that's similar to.
That's okay. That's a fair point.
That's similar to the contingency plans. And, from East Greenwich's perspective, right, we have, I understand the fire department has to be apprised because they're responders, but remember, we're right across the street. And if there's an incident, we are, through our cooperative agreements, we'll be responding. And so there's a little more to it. And, we can get into all that. We're working that out, all of this out, hopefully with the applicant. And, that may come in front of you at the actual hearing, either jointly by the applicant, by us. We don't know how that's all going to work out. But I would just encourage you, we're coming to this with real analysis and experts. Not everyone has the resources to do that, but some might. For instance, you have, we have some experts from well-known sort of public interest groups, that one of whom was on the phone, Kevin, right, on the Zoom call. He may have expertise that he'd like to weigh in on the protocols, the testing, all of that. And it would be helpful if that's a public process and not after the fact for a lot of those conditions and a lot of those submissions in your 14 conditions.
Thank you.
I don't think it's anything the applicant isn't going to do anyway. It's just a matter of timing and sharing the data.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Robert Zartarian, you've been patient over there.
Yes, thank you, Mark. During Richard's presentation, he mentioned that 93% of the pathogens would be eliminated. Could he explain again what happens to the balance, the 7%?
I think what he said was 93% of the volume of the waste. I hope that's what he said, but please.
He mentioned pathogens, and I thought he said 93%, but I may have been confused.
I hope not. Okay, Richard.
Yeah, Robert, I did say 93%, but it's actually 93% of the waste disappears. That's the point that I was making. As far as pathogens are concerned, we're looking at as close to 100% that could be possible.
Okay, and Mark, one question for you as well. Is it standard procedure for the DEM to grant a minor source permit before you actually know what the process is, or were there exceptions made in this case?
Okay, let me address that. I do want to mention, we have a standard for reduction of contamination, and it's 10 to the -6, which means no more than 1 in a million. That's the math, although really the way you test it is you put 1 million spores, and if any of them survive the growth, that's a failure. So the idea, that's why I said, I hope he said that wrong, because 93% destruction is not treatment. Because if I had 1 million dangerous tuberculosis bacterium and 93% of them are killed, then the other 7% are going to infect me. So that's why
we'll send them to your office, Mo.
Yeah. So that's but in terms of the minor source permit, I'm a little hesitant to. I don't know what I can say about that, only because first of all, it wasn't our office that issued that permit, it's the air section, and there was litigation on that, and the litigation is still in mediation and all. I don't know that I'm allowed to talk about that, but if the parties involved would like to say something to that, they're welcome to. Mike, you understand my hesitancy here.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, maybe if Robert asked the question again, I would think the applicant might be in a position to respond, since it's more of a request about a permit.
Mike Kelly, did I hear you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yeah, so this is actually Nick Voss from Mike Kelly's office. I just wanted to quickly say, so as far as the air permit, yeah, that's all being, I don't think we should talk right now about the things that are currently ongoing in litigation, and I don't know that it's fair to the mediation process to get into specifics right now, because we are working with the mediator and with each other to come to an amicable resolution and to make sure that everybody's concerns are allayed. I can tell you that MedRecycler is working really hard to make sure that any requirements are met, and that any permit they have is subject to further regulation, such that if for some reason, and it's not the case, but if for some reason it was the case that the permit was insufficient or that there were additional emissions, anything like that, that would then be reviewed and there would be a process. But as I said, everybody's working together and I don't know that it's really an issue. So I think we should just leave it at that, obviously, just because of the status of the litigation. But I will say MedRecycler is working really hard to make sure that everything's above board and that, the proper permits are being procured.
Okay, that's fine. And where, in which office are you?
I'm in the Office of Land Revitalization and
No,
Sustainable.
not you, Mark, the gentleman that just spoke.
Oh, Nick Vaz. He's with Mike Kelly is the attorney for the MedRecycler project.
Okay, understood.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Vaz is, I think, the point of contact for that office.
I am, yeah, Mike and I are working together with MedRecycler on this.
Thank you.
Mark, I would also like to make a comment, and that is that I've been involved in probably half of these meetings, and what I can advise the public is that everything is transparent. Nobody tries to sweep anything under the table. All the questions are asked as they should, and I think all the answers are genuine. I think that's really what the public needs to hear.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Kevin?
Mark, if I could just ask a question,
yes.
what public processes are you referring to?
Well, I'll let Richard answer that.
Yeah, I don't mean public processes. I mean, all the discussions that I've been involved in, everyone has been transparent and open. And I'm saying that's what the public wants to hear, that there's nothing that's swept under the table. Because that's where the concerns come from. Is if there's something that you should be aware of that you're not made aware of.
No, I only asked the question because it just seemed strange that the permit would be granted even albeit at a minor source when there's so many questions unanswered and about the process and et cetera, et cetera. So I was just asking the question as to whether it was normal procedure for DEM to do that. And I think it's been explained to my satisfaction.
There are two separate processes here. The air permit is regard to how big the motor is and all.
Right.
That's a separate process from the approval of a medical waste facility, which is what we're involved, Yen and I are involved with.
Right. Yeah, let's just.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Boudris, you have another question.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Kevin Boudris from Conservation Law Foundation again here. Thank you for fielding another question. And I apologize in advance because this question is about the minor source air permit, which I understand is a subject of litigation. And I know, Mark, that it isn't within your bureau, but there's been, quite a bit said tonight about the efficacy of the thermal oxidizer and the cleanliness of the emissions. And I just wanted to clarify with respect to the testing that's required at the back end of the emissions under the minor source air permit. So maybe Mr. Campanella, you can answer this. The emissions testing that's required is periodic testing, right? It's not continuous emissions monitoring of certain dangerous positions. It's, on occasion.
I believe we have continuous sensor monitoring on the systems.
You do? Is that for temperature as well as hazardous air pollutants like dioxins, furans, and lead?
Richard, you want to explain where the sensors are in relation to what Mr. Boudris's question?
Yeah, that was actually one of the documents I was looking for earlier, and I actually can't find it. But we have temperature monitoring, pressure monitoring, specifically for the negative pressure monitoring to ensure that we never have any egress from the system. As far as the emissions monitoring, as it stands at the moment, we need to prove on commissioning that it meets the requirements. I don't think the DEM have yet pre-prescribed the times that that's got to be rechecked. But normally what happens is that when people see that it's well within the prescribed emissions, they just want reassurance that it stays within. And the experience we've had in the past where that's been still subject to agreement is we show that it's within emissions, the plant goes into production, we then test once a week with an outside source, so it's independent. Once we've done that a few times, it goes to once a month, and then whatever the
DEM would require us to do.
regulatory authority requires.
Right.
So we don't have continuous emissions monitoring on the basis that we expect to be so well within the requirements that it would be a non-required expense.
Yeah, that would have to be proven when we first start the inception, and the testing would be done on a regular basis in the beginning, as Rick indicated. And then once we are in compliance and all the testing comes back as a positive, then basically we would defer back to DEM on how often they need it reported and monitored.
Kevin, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Andrew Tights, and by the way, to all the elected representatives, if I don't say your title, it's not intentional. I can't always see and remember.
Yes, thank you. Andrew Tights here, representing the town of East Greenwich Town Solicitor. I just wanted to respond as to the question about the minor air permit. And I just want to make sure we're not waiving anything here on the record. The town does still maintain legally that it is not proper for DEM to issue that without a public process. We understand that DEM has a different view, and we've taken it to court and we're in mediation. And I don't want to take a lot of time arguing it now, but I just, for the record, we still do believe that they do not have the right legally, notwithstanding their regulations, but we don't believe under the statutes they have the right to do it without the public process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Thank you, Andrew.
I won't argue the point only because I can't practice law without a license.
I understand. We agree to disagree.
Okay. I have ultimate respect for the attorneys, and so I won't pretend to be one. And
Mark, if I can interject for a second. Hi, everybody. This is Susan Forcier. I'm
Susan,
counsel for the department. I don't want to I didn't want to cut off any of the conversation. Obviously, the transparency and the emissions information is clearly important. I just want to kind of bring us back to the fact that we're here to discuss the waste permit and not the air permit. So I just don't want us to get too sidetracked on those issues with the air permit. So that's all I wanted to say. I just want to make sure I bring it back and keep everyone on track. Thank you.
Thank you. If anybody missed that, Susan is our legal counsel on both cases. Mike, you have another comment.
Mark, I do, just as this thing evolves. Yeah, so when you say Susan's the lawyer on both cases, we don't have a case yet on this license, do we? I don't know, maybe we do.
Well,
I'm kidding, Mark.
I'm not an attorney on both.
Yeah. No. So what is challenging, which is why we end up talking about air permits and solid waste permits, is that they relate, right? What comes in has a lot to do with what goes out. And so, for instance, when Kevin was talking about efficacy testing and stack testing and general emissions confirmatory testing and how that would look, it's a little different when what you have is the inputs into a process are constant. You know exactly what it is, and it's running 24/7 on a conveyor belt, right? And it's a lot easier. The emissions are more predictable. Here, which, query whether this is an air permit question or a solid waste license question, is that given that as Mr. Campanella explained, that the waste is going to come in a container that's never opened. It's going to go into the shredder unopened, be shredded, which is, you explained, was a source of potential emissions there, right? Then go through the rest of the process, having additional potential.
It sounds like you were involved in the process and you know some of the answers already, but Michael, from what I remember, we had discussed as far as the medical.
Sorry, Nick, do you mind if I finish?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. So the issue there is, none of what's coming in, if it's in a closed container, is going to be opened and spot checked like you see at other facilities. Susan and I worked on, say, the Orbit facility, right near the central landfill, and that has a license. It takes in different waste. And what happens is we actually check batches, which is a challenge with pathogens, right? However, it also, you weigh that challenge against the challenge of how do you really know what's going in it if you're not spot checking? And so I think some of that goes to, if you can or can't, the DEM elects to do that, require that or not, then perhaps the testing has to be more robust in some way to try to address the uncertainty that happens when you take in a box with a question mark on it. Now, yes, the people who supply that waste are obligated to comply with law. We also know that one of your proposed conditions was that it not have solid waste, and I forget I think it was incidental solid, whatever that is, but there's no way to check that if you're not, spot checking. And so some of that, I think, goes to Kevin's question. So that's, I think, just why we end up talking about both at the same time, and why the information in talking about one process triggers a discussion of the others. And sorry, Nick, go ahead.
As I had mentioned originally in our past discussions, all the medical waste that we're getting are from licensed haulers. It's regulated, it's cataloged, and it's documented. So we know where it came from, what's inside, and where, so it's not, we're not receiving unsealed or enclosed packages with surprises in them. If they're coming from the hospital or the laboratories, whoever the hauler is going to give us a manifest that documents everything, where they picked it up, what's in there, and when they picked, when it came to us. So we have complete tracking system from when they pick it up to our facility.
Yeah, Nick, I wasn't addressing that. I mean, those of us on the call who are old enough will remember that one of your biggest customers, I think, who deals with medical waste, actually had a legal problem with their waste that they were transshipping without treatment.
Everybody has issues, I'm sure.
In addition, there's also human error and all of that. So the idea that because they're required by law not to ever make a mistake or to violate the law, therefore, with certainty what's going into the shredder, it just isn't true all the time, and it can't be. And so the question is, how do you deal with that? You don't want to have medical waste where you're unpacking it, exposing people, but you may want to have some vetting process that would be appropriate for such a facility. And in the end, again, that we're all going to get into as we negotiate or at the hearing. I just wanted Mark to raise the question and address Susan's question of why we're talking air permits sometimes when we're talking solid waste, because of this process is sort of unique here.
Thank you. I would also mention that we're being an informational hearing. I know a lot of people have expressed some concerns, and that's totally fine. But if you have a concern, you should document your concern either by email or writing, or by raising it at the public hearing. Because if you want some assurance in writing, or you want some answer in writing, then you really should send us a formal comment. We will respond to each and every comment, and we will have each and every response reviewed by legal and management as well. So I just want to.
Yeah, Mark, also, we're going to do everything we can to be safe, and we've shown it so far based on our, process going back and forth with DEM and with other facilities. And that's my commitment, that we're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure that we're always in compliance, and make sure that we're doing everything that's necessary to protect everyone and protect the facility.
Thank you. Representative Caldwell.
Hi, thanks everyone for your candor and hard work that we are still here right now. And Mr. Campanella also for, really taking the time to answer all these questions. I wanted to go back to something I think Richard talked about, speaking of transparency, and you talked about the tests that would be done daily or within a certain number of hours at MedRecycler, and the results would be sent to DEM. One, are those tests also available to the public? Or if MedRecycler fails those tests and DEM knows, I believe Mr. Campanella said you two would work that out together, how to move forward, but would the public be made aware of that? Or at what point along the way would, we as neighbors know that, there was failure in these tests at MedRecycler?
Is the question to me or is the question to Nick?
Well, I think it would be to you, Mark, because basically if we're doing our testing and our protocols, if there's any discrepancies or any findings that we report to DEM, DEM is going to have those reports, whether or not they may. I believe that being that they're, I guess, a government agency, that they will be required to disclose any failures or any, uncertainties that are occurring. Mark, is that proper?
I guess it depends on the situation. Often you write the testing protocols to say, if there's a failure, what will you do? And that you'll and it depends on the nature of the failure, but usually what will you do to address that? I can't, with Rhode Island Hospital, Stericycle, our two other permitted facilities, we don't have a standard procedure that a failure in the protocol would result to letters in the neighborhood. That would be pretty unusual. I would say the failures are pretty rare. When there is a failure, you have a process to diagnose what's going on. That's not normally been a standard part of our permit, but I guess it depends on what the failure is. If there were a fire at the facility or there was some catastrophic failure, I think that would be a whole different story.
Mm-hmm. And just thinking about ways we can, of course, engender some public trust in, the project. And there's obviously a lot of concerns about the safety, and thinking about ways we can know that if something is to happen there, that we would be made aware. It wouldn't be 6 months down the line that it shuts down and we've all been subject to dangerous, air quality or whatever for the past 6 months.
If there's any uncertainties or issues, as you're pointing out, we would be shutting down the system and fixing the problem right away. But we would be working with DEM to advise them of what's going on based on our reports that we give to them. So this way they can oversee and make sure that we're doing everything in compliance.
Thanks, Nick.
And we have to, that's a really good question. You have to think about it. Sometimes I think you can run into a situation where you're sending so much information to people that they stop looking at it. And so you have to come up with a situation to give them meaningful information. And I know sometimes you just barrage people with reports. That doesn't really accomplish that function, but thank you for bringing that up.
I hear you. Thank you so much.
Denise Lopez.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. Thank you. I just wanted to get to a couple of questions that were listed in the chat regarding to air quality. What are the emissions from the exhaust from the generators going to be? And I know we referred to Monarch, which is in New Mexico. And
Did we lose you? I think you muted yourself. I think you accidentally muted.
I did. Sorry, I was trying to jump to the Monarch article, so apologies. With regards to Monarch, which is the other pyrolysis site in the US, it states that a man who lives close to Monarch facility said he understood what Monarch's meter readings told him, but the sniff test tells us that the stuff in the air and the smell all the time. So there is clearly an issue with the smell to that facility. I know there are some additional buffers, but without this, you know, you're testing it out in models, but we're not going to know about a sniff test until it's a little bit too late to help those who live close to the facility. So I guess, what do you have to say about with regards to the smell or the concerns that they've had with the Monarch facility? And then with regards to other sites that are, you know, up and running using pyrolysis for medical waste internationally, do you have the names of those companies, just so that maybe we can look to see any that are doing successfully, or are there no facilities internationally either that are doing this?
Yeah, I really can't speculate on what the other people are doing, but I could definitely get some of that information and post it on our website. So this way you could look at other facilities. As far as your sniff test, basically the process that we're doing between the thermal oxidizer and all the different steps, we minimized the smell drastically. And then basically once we are operational, we will put in and include air cleaning process. So this way we would not have any bad odors that would be going outside the facility.
Thank you, but no guarantees could be made for that. And we already, you know, it's just,
well, I'm going to be
why this has to be next to a residential area. Again, appreciate your information. It just the air, wanted to raise the air quality question as well as the exhaust from the generators. Do you know how much exhaust is going to be out into the air with regard to the generators that are being put in place?
The amount of emissions are going to be as a standard generator that everyone else is currently using. There's a lot of industrial and commercial businesses and buildings that use outside generators, and basically the emissions that are out there are going to be less than what a standard car or a standard generator is currently producing.
Okay, thank you for answering. And if you could please put that information about the other facilities that are doing it successfully, that would be appreciated, because, you know, looking at the website, it's a lot of generic information, and even the workflow, it's you know, it's a very high level, and, you know, just kind of telling the public what they want to hear rather than actually getting into concrete answers, which you can't answer because this hasn't been done.
Yeah, and then going back to your other question, basically the area that we picked it basically specifically because it was zoned industrial.
Just because it's zoned industrial doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but thank you.
Thank you. Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on to the notice provisions, because that's actually addressed in your condition 12 in the notice you provided.
Yes.
And so, you know, in providing DEM basically of notice of the exigent conditions that have arisen, basically, you know, that I think what you're hearing from our state representative is that should probably go to the, you know, East Greenwich, West Warwick, the community in some way. At least this isn't sort of a routine, let's bury you with paper question. You've required this as an exigent circumstance, right? You called it a dangerous condition has occurred. That would seem to make common sense. And the rest of it is if they're notifying you of emissions failures, I would think that would go to, you know, the abutters and the two communities as well. It's a little different, Mark, when we look at 1 × 10⁻⁶, 1 in a million, right? In terms of our risk assessment profiles, right? What we're saying is that if you ingest something, dermal contact, inhalation, and ingestion, and you have greater than 1 × 10⁻, at a concentration, you will not exceed 1 × 10⁻⁶, meaning it's not likely to be a carcinogen, mutagen, or teratogen at that level beyond 1 in a million. The difference is that assumes a loading scenario, that you are basically a 135-pound white male getting this loading over time. The difference with a pathogen is 1 in a million once can kill you.
Absolutely. How many COVID viruses does it take to kill you?
Exactly.
One. So the standard for medical waste, that's why when I heard the 93%, I went, eh. Even 1 in a million, the standard is kill. And it's not that you have to kill 999,000 out of a million. The standard is that you have to kill 1 million. And you can buy these spore strips as 100,000, or you can buy them in 1 million. And it's so the standard, and this is a really important thing. And there have been experiences of medical waste being shredded that has caused problems in Washington State as well as Rhode Island. You know, that we learn as time goes on, that the medical waste is you kill everything. That's different. That's different than air pollution, where you reduce 95% of the benzene, or something else where you reduce 99% of the emissions. You've got to kill everything with medical waste. And whether that's pyrolysis or autoclave or anything else, you've got to kill everything. Like, most is not good enough, because it's not, as you quite rightly pointed out, it has nothing to do with concentration. If you killed most of the bacteria, you did 0 in our regulations. Thank you.
So Mark, I was just bringing that up to follow on Justine, Representative Caldwell's question regarding public notice. So in this instance, finding out that DEM got notified of a system failure, but nobody else did, and we find out after the fact, it's a little less public.
That is a very valid concern, and I hope you'll make that. I hope you'll make that formal comment.
And you're looking for those after the public hearing, not now, right?
You can send me a comment anytime when this hearing is over. When this event is over, you can send me a public comment.
And will you deem those comments that you're going to look at and determine whether there's substantive comments requiring response as if they were presented at the hearing or after?
Yes, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong. If I receive any formal public comments between now and the time of the end of the comment period, those will be responded to. Am I correct, Susan?
All substantive comments will be responded to in the response to comments.
So you can send it to me right now, or you can wait, or you can do both. You can send me some concerns right now, and if you think of something else, then you can send another comment letter. And all of those will be considered formal comments, unless you've asked that they not be.
Thank you.
And usually to clarify, if somebody asks me a question, I'll say, do you want this to be a formal public comment, or are you just asking a question? And I'm sure I'll be getting a formal public comment from your office as well. It should. Okay, I hope I've not, I know I've had a lot of questions in the chat here, and I hope I've addressed them. Any other questions?
Mark, is Mark Carullo from the West Warwick Town Hall still on the call?
Yeah, he's still there.
Hey, Mark, I was just wondering if the consultant that you all hired in the summer to look into this process, has he reported back yet? If so, were there any concerns?
That process hasn't started yet until we worked with DEM.
Oh, okay. So that hasn't even begun. Gotcha. Thank you.
Tim Faulkner from MedRecyclerRI.
Thank you. Are there any plans to expand getting medical waste from facilities outside of Rhode Island, across New England or New York?
That's a possibility. We're still weighing out our options right now, Tim.
And where, outside of the United States, is this equipment being used on medical waste? I think the company that builds this is in South Africa, maybe. But where else is this, operation being done? I know pyrolysis is being used in other places, but is there like a commercial pyrolysis system that is in operation somewhere around the globe?
Yes, there's several that are using this process for medical waste. There's a large company called Betson. They do a lot of these plants and facilities processing medical waste currently in China, Japan, England, many parts of Europe.
And they're processing medical waste?
Correct.
commercially?
With your system?
No, not with our system.
Thank you.
Okay. Bridget Valverde.
Hi there, Mr. Campanella, I just wanted a quick clarification. Earlier in this meeting, you stated that you don't need a business license from the town of West Warwick, but that runs counter to my understanding of the situation. Could you clarify?
Right now, we're not at the point of getting a business license.
But you do need to get a business license.
That I would have to revert back to our attorney and our engineers and whatever the township requirements would be.
Okay.
Okay. And did he answer your question adequately?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Oates? You're
unmute. There we go. I beg your pardon. Yeah, that's exactly why I asked the question. Has the license application in West Warwick been put forward yet? And Mr. Campanella said it wasn't required. So that's where I was confused.
I had completed it and submitted the application probably about 7 months or 8 months ago. And basically, we were told to wait until DEM's process. So I don't know whether it is required, not required. Again, that would be up to the attorney and the township or the West Warwick to advise us.
I see a comment here, a question. Mr. Campanella told the West Warwick Town Planning Committee April 2019 that he would expand to take medical waste from the Northeast United States. Can you please clarify that for the group?
Basically, we're looking to get medical waste from all of New England and some parts of New York, but between Rhode Island and the surrounding states, such as New Hampshire, Massachusetts, there's, I think in Rhode Island alone, you have about 13 or 12 hospitals. So that should be more than sufficient of us processing medical waste.
Do I have any other questions? Are there plans in the future to expand the amount of waste processed at this particular location? Before I let Mr. Campanella answer that, I do want to answer it for the department. When we issue any kind of a waste permit, whether it's hazardous medical, septage, whatever, when we issue a waste permit, we issue a permit for so many pounds per day, so many tons per day. And we have a lot of other permit conditions. Sometimes you can make a minor change to a permit that's a relatively easy process. But changing the capacity of a waste management facility, by definition, is a major modification and does necessitate a public hearing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Campanella.
Yeah, no, basically, as Mark indicated, our permit is for up to 70 tons per day. And if we were to looking to expand that, we would have to reapply and go through this whole process again. And at this time, I believe with the 70 tons per day that we're doing or we're looking to do is more than enough capacity for us at this facility. If we were looking to do more, we would probably isolate a different zoning locations based on geographical distribution.
We recently went through a public hearing process for Stericycle that changed their capacity.
Right.
Let me see, I've got a couple of other questions. Are all these states you are naming will be brought in 4 to 6 trucks daily? Not sure what that comment means. Maybe you could clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, it's not each state is bringing us 4 to 6 trucks a day. The maximum that we could process is that amount. If that answers the question better.
And also legally, and this is important, legally, we can't tell any private facility via the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution. We can't say you can take so much from Rhode Island and so much from outside Rhode Island. We can only say you can take this kind of waste so much. Where it comes from is not within our purview to regulate.
Also, DEM issues and administers the permits and the licenses for the haulers. So if they are not a licensed hauler in the state of Rhode Island, they cannot bring us any of the medical waste.
That's one of the things we can regulate.
Right.
Mike.
So to follow up on that, the prohibition though is that you just can't send out of state waste even after processing to the central landfill.
Correct.
So they do regulate that piece of it, and so I'm not sure if that kind of helps, but one of the things that is of interest in terms of the waste that's being brought to the facility is whether or not we heard today that the waste on the back end that's not destroyed will end up in asphalt plants. The DEM is required with other facilities that have byproducts that are not going to go out as waste, that they demonstrate a market for it and contracts.
I think we've already.
Is that contemplated here?
I think I've already sent Mr. Campanella a letter. I'm 100% positive I did, that said if that does go for any other use other than disposal, that would have to go through the beneficial use determination process. So the facility that's going to use it would have to apply for a beneficial use determination. And that, as you quite rightly pointed out, Mike, that beneficial use determination has to prove that there actually is a market here and it's not just an alternate form of disposal. Nick, would you like to add anything to that?
No, that's pretty accurate.
Is that going to be, Mark, is that going to be part of this public process before or merely a condition afterwards that we'll never see?
The bud would have to go for its own public hearing, because let's say the bud is in another community. It has to go for hearing in that community, that waste from a site in West Warwick is going to go to Providence or wherever it goes to. That our rules require that the community that would be notified would be Providence, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't notify your community as well.
And is that a license condition?
If it's a beneficial use determination?
No. I meant the requirement that given that the stated purpose was to use it in that way, is it a license condition that you can't operate till you have contracts with facilities that have received such?
I think what we put in the license was that any waste generated by the facility has to be disposed of in accordance with Rhode Island solid waste regulations. So we put a condition that's rather broad in that way, rather than we try to give ourselves, not limit our regulatory authority in that way.
The applicant has a flexibility, right? They could, right? Is that what they could either
if it's in accordance with the regulations.
Okay.
In the case of a beneficial use determination, that would have to, as I say, it would have to be a completely separate public hearing process.
Mark,
and the public hearing should happen in the community that's going to receive the waste. Richard,
Mark, if I may comment.
Please.
Yeah, we consider moving the residue to the landfill as the worst case scenario, i.e. we haven't add any beneficial use out of it at all. But anyone that is going to take it needs to be presented with it before they can see A, if they can use it, and B, if they can be permitted to take it. So that's something in the future. And like everything, we don't intend to do anything out of regulation. For now, what we've been advised that it has to go to regulated disposal, we accepting that. But in the future, if we can use it as a soil enhancer, for example, and it can be proven that that's exactly what it does, then that's another way that we can reduce what goes to landfill.
I've got a question in the chat. It is why, and I won't read, there were several, Kathy Constantino, but the genesis of it is why West Warwick and why this site?
I felt that the site was designed for our application. Basically the size of the building, the height of the building, the amount of loading docks, the accessibility to I-95, many different scenarios, the amount of electric that was there available for us, the fact that we can sell the power back to the building or to the grid if need be. So there was a lot of attributes. Also the fact that Rhode Island was looking for a certain amount of renewable energy milestones that they're trying to achieve. The fact that we're looking to create 20 to 30 jobs. The fact that we were going to be working with the local union, with the IBW, with the Pipe Fitters Association, and provide, countless jobs for them. We were looking to work with New England Tech to bring on some of their students that graduated, as well as their interns, being that they specialized in welding and piping and electrical, to provide jobs for those people as well, and to educate them on renewable energy, waste management. So that's the reason why we picked the location and picked Rhode Island.
Thank you. Ms. Andriozzi, you had a question. Ms. Andriozzi? Okay, we'll come back to her. Amy Petrino.
Mr. Campanella, how big is that building across the street from my house?
I believe it's over 500,000 square feet.
And how much are you going to take?
We've rented 48,000 square feet, so it's less than 10% of the building.
So when you were looking for sites, you picked that building because of its size, which really is way too big for your need, and the amount of docking that it has for the trucks, which you say you're not using that much of. How many of those bays are going to be available to you?
All the bays that are in our building are usable for us, but basically there weren't too many locations that we saw that were in the condition of the building that we've rented, the height and the construction of the facility, and the fact that it was by I-95.
And again, I'm sorry, how many bays are you accessing?
In our space, we have 4 bays and 1 drive-in.
Okay, so how many bays are in that building total? Do you know, on both sides?
There's probably 50 or 60.
So again, way more than what you needed.
But I'm not renting the rest of the building. I'm only renting 48,000 of the 500,000 square feet.
Oh, I understand that. But when someone just asked you why that site, you answered that the building was a great size and that there were bays. So way more than what you needed on both size and bays. Correct?
I'm sorry, but I'm missing your question.
My question isn't a question. It's the fact that you told the West Warwick Planning Committee,
right,
in 2019, that once this was up and running, that there was plenty of room in that building to expand. And at that point, when you had first come into the state from New Jersey, you said that that was such a great building and that the expansion opportunity over there was fantastic.
Yes, we can expand our facility from 70 tons to 140 tons. So we can double the operation there, but we have no interest at this time to increase that. And if we did go through that process, we would have to go back to DEM and we would have to go through this whole process again, which at this time I am not at
But it
liberty.
would be a heck of a lot easier, wouldn't it, Mr. Dennen, once he completes it this time, to have it revisited and expand and move it along then? Because when he was talking to the planning committee in West Warwick, it was all about the fact that that building was gigantic and you were taking a small amount of it, and that later on you were planning on expanding into a much bigger facility.
No. It's to our facility. When I mentioned that, that was based on my square footage of 48,000 square feet.
But I was at that meeting, and those minutes are public. Those
Yes,
minutes
fine.
are public, and you said that you were looking to make this much bigger.
Hey,
You also said that there was going to be something in the building, which Magdalena asked you if there were visits. And you, at that West Warwick meeting almost 2 years ago, said that you were going to have an observation room
Yes,
for VIPs and guests where they could come in and see the entire process.
correct.
And your quote was, it would be open for photo opportunities with public officials.
Correct. Not for, it wasn't for photo opportunities. What we did is we designed the office area with a hallway that has glass partitions. So people that are inside the office area are able to see and tour the inside of the building. So if we needed to get anyone from the town or anyone from the city or the state that wanted to come in and look at the process and the operation, that they were able to do that. I have no intentions on expanding to 500,000 square feet of building because there's other tenants there that are longtime tenants, and there's not enough medical waste to handle that kind of capacity.
But at that meeting and in this meeting, you just admitted that you said you would take medical waste from the entire northeast of the United States.
Yeah, up to 70 tons maximum. That's all we can handle.
Currently, until you expand.
We're not looking to expand at that location.
But thanks, Mr. Campanella. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you. And I just want to, just so we can stay focused, I want to tell what we're looking at is reviewing this application. And as with any company, he could come in the future and file another application. He could file an application for a building next door, down the street, 2 towns away. What we are charged with is getting the information out for this application. We can't review something that exists only in someone's mind. So I do want to focus us this. And again, let me mention, everybody who has a concern expressed here, this is not a formal hearing. You should send me an email, send Yen Lee an email, or make a comment at the hearing so that we can get you a proper response. Ms. Andriozzi, are you there?
I am here. Thank
Okay.
you. Sorry. Took a 2-minute break there. I'm just
understand that.
I'm just trying to understand this correctly, and I want to excuse if I don't. Waste comes in at about $600 per ton. Is that correct?
It's whatever we're able to negotiate with the haulers.
Okay. The average is about 600 per ton, and it's 70 tons. That would come out to about 42,000 per day, and approximately 7 to 15 million per year. You had mentioned that you weren't interested in expanding. So that is kind of like the pro forma balance sheet that you're going to be operating on from this point forward.
Okay. What's the question, Ms. Magdalena?
I mean, usually tax credits at the city of West Warwick they get any tax credits? And the $17 million bond. I'm not understanding how that plays into all of this.
Yeah, there's no tax credits. Actually, we're going to be giving the town lots of money for us to be there based on the property that we have at that location and the dollar amount in comparison to our facility. As far as the bonds, again, it's just a gateway. We are not using taxpayer dollars. The money's coming from one private fund. It's a private office, family office that's financing the whole project for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Oates.
Unmute.
My last question, Mr. Campanella, as we're speaking, I'm reviewing some photos on Sun Pacific Holding Corporation that were published on one of the pages here. And it shows the containers with the generators or fans that are on top, the big Carnex boxes that look like they're on foundations. This shows 3 of them in one view and 2 in another. And then inside it says the power, windows are all set up, offices are all set up, and there's photos of the inside of the facility. Is this the facility at Division Street? These were published Sun Pacific Power, October 19, 2019. Is this the East Greenwich, the West Warwick site?
I don't know what pictures you're looking at, but basically almost all the equipment is inside the facility.
Okay.
Staging area. So it's not set up, it's not connected, it's not wired, or nothing's piped for it.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, Mike.
In looking at sort of the experience in running a facility, I guess I thought you said, Nicholas, that you had one a family or a major investor that's going to be funding this. Is that what you said?
No, I said a family office. We have one fund that's taking the whole amount of the bond.
Okay, and can you share with us who that is?
Not at this time. I don't know if that's something that needs to be disclosed. Mike Kelly.
Can I just quickly, so Nick Voss again from Mike Kelly's office. I think we should really stick, and I'm not trying to, I understand it's a valid question, and I'm not saying anything about Mr. Donegan asking it, but I do think that the purpose of this hearing is the DEM approvals of this particular permit, and going into the financing. While I understand that people have interest in it, I don't think it's what we're here for right now.
And the point well taken that there's things we can look at in the review process and things we don't look at in the review process, and how much he gets paid for the waste and how much financing comes and all. It's not our responsibility when we review a permit to make sure that the applicant makes money. It's our responsibility to make sure that the applicant follows the regulations. That's his own problem. So this permit isn't going to look at anything to do with the financing of it. That doesn't mean that that's not a concern to someone. That's not going to be a concern in this process. And if we got a comment about financing, we'd say financing is not in our rules, other than financial assurance, which is.
Mark, I would say that the only question, the difference between a public informational Q&A session and a administrative hearing, part of it is a trust exercise, right? You want to figure out who's operating. And if you told me Waste Management is funding this, I look at the experience factor of the current operator a little differently than if it's a guy from Nevada.
Thank you.
That's why I was asking.
No, that is a valid point. Who's operating it. I just meant from the standpoint of how much money you're going to make and how much you're going to charge for each pound. That is not something that really is part of the permitting process.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Faulkner, you had a question.
Yeah, the question about, I think the bonding was raised in the financing by the applicant, so I'm not sure if I can still ask a question about that or not, but
you can ask a question. I'm just trying to focus people's expectation.
If the bonds default, do the assets revert to the state?
It has nothing to do with the state. The state is not providing any funding. If the project defaults, it goes to the investor.
But what's the state's capacity in this bonding?
There is no, the bonding is just a gateway. It's just a paper documentation allowing our investor to be able to use the bonding mechanisms to provide tax-free bonds or taxable bonds. There is no risk, there's no exposure to the state, there's no tax dollars being used by the state. And I think I've went over that with you prior, but if you need more clarity, you can speak to David Preston and he will be able to address any of your concerns.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for other questions.
What time's dinner?
What time's dinner? Right. Hey, I'm on
After this, Nick.
I'm on a clear liquid diet tonight, so I can't have any.
We're still doing 25% capacity indoor dining.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, if not, I want to thank people for your patience. I know it's a long process. You guys have been great about being patient about having me get to you. I just want to make sure I've addressed everything. This doesn't mean you can't, and I want to emphasize again, if you have a concern, put it in writing, send it to us as an official comment. You'll get a response in writing. And if you just want more information, you can do that too. You can informally say, give me more information, please. You can send it to me by email. Actually, send it to Yen Lee, she's the project manager. And this is her email address. I accidentally sent it to one person. I'll send it to everyone. So you can send it to her. You can also send it to me. I'm putting my email in here as well. Please feel free to send us your formal comments, or you need more information, you can't find something. You know, we're really trying to be as transparent as we can and giving people as much information as they can to formulate their comments. So once again, any concern you expressed here, please make sure and follow up by sending a formal comment in writing if you want that concern to be addressed and brought to the attention of our management. Are there any other questions? Okay. I want to thank everybody, the elected officials and East Greenwich and West Warwick. You guys have been here for 3 hours, and that really says something about your commitment. And as well as all of you, I think I had 100 people at one point that were here, and 60 of them are still here. And Nick and your team, thank you for taking the time to answer all the questions.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your comments.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great job, Mark.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
And like I say, we're always here, so follow up with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make sure and cut and paste all of the comments so that I have them for the record. Cut and paste everything in the chat. Okay, final chat, MedRecycler. Medical waste. Okay, that was one of our longest public meetings ever. I think we broke a record, almost broke a record. Maybe Central went longer, but that's good. Last two public meetings I had, I got one person, and another meeting I had 2 people. So,
Mark, you know you're not muted, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Good night.
I'm just rambling here, but we've got I've got 100 people. My last 5 public meetings have probably had 10 people. So very well attended. Thank you, everybody. I'll end the meeting unless anyone else has anything they want. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Good job.
Going once, going twice, it's over. I'm gonna stop the recording.